How many countries were affected by this data breach? Countries. That's crazy. How many people? What group of people wasn't affected? Let me restate that. What group of people wasn't affected? What can I find? Excuse me. How can I find out if my data was stolen? What should I do if it was? Welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I'm Nick and this is Super Simple Security Principles. Joining us each week. Join us. Oh my gosh. Can we start over? Join us each week and learn how to protect yourself online no matter your skill level. This is our first special edition episode where we occasionally cover breaking news. That is important to our listeners. This is very important to our listeners. So let's see what our Master Guardian has to say. Makani, how you doing
Hey,
today, bud?
doing well. Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Sounds like a
Uh,
big one. I
yeah,
mean,
setting a new record for data breaches. There's
really,
probably, yep, biggest one ever. I think we've said that before, but this one, it can be true again, right? Because we're breaking the record again, depending on
just like
exactly
the
how you
Olympics
measure.
we
But
saw and records being broken,
yep,
it just happened again. Data breach.
exact, exactly.
Yikes. Well, I'm kind of dying to know. Like, I hope you don't mind, but I
Right,
enjoyed
you've been
those
out of the loop on
questions.
this one, I gathered, right?
I am totally out of the loop on this one. I've had my head literally buried in the sand and haven't been paying attention to the news that I usually listen to.
Which is fine, no worries. So the thing is, with this one too, there was a lot of speculation. There's a little bit of fuzziness and whatever. They all like the news sources like to jump on it very quickly,
Yeah.
and I always like to wait a few days to let the dust settle and let the more reputable sources come out with their statements. And anyway, so, like I said, there's a little bit of fuzziness on some of the details, but here's a couple of the interesting numbers. There were 2.9 billion records across three countries: the United States, Canada, and the UK.
Wow.
Yeah,
How many records?
2.9 billion.
2.9 billion.
Now,
That's
that doesn't some of the headlines it was represented as people, but
okay.
that's not the case. It's 2.9 billion records. This is a database. Like, this is, one set of information. A name, an
Gotcha.
address, a phone number, a social that are all connected together. That's one record.
Ooh.
And we don't really know exactly how many people. We were going to answer that, but the best we can get is we don't really know, because there's more records than one per person. Um, like Kem has checked, for example, and there are quite a few of his, and and then there's name overlaps and things you can't really determine. At least it's not easy to determine unique number of people. Though one other interesting number that gives you at least some idea is there were 134 million unique email addresses. So again, that's not a direct correlation to people, but at least it gives you
Right.
a ballpark, right?
Right. Right.
Now, but on a more personal level, so there's a website, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, but where you can go check to see if your data was in the breach. And so I checked mine, I checked my wife's, checked all my siblings, right? There were seven of us, as you know. And all those people I checked, there was only one who didn't have any data. And Some of us had quite a lot. One of the more impressive ones, there was one record that went back 30 years.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
Yeah, and
gosh.
spanning all the way up to more recently. But yeah, and not all the data was perfectly accurate, but there were a lot of addresses, and most of it was accurate. And the social security number in particular, which is in a lot of ways the most sensitive piece of data, right?
Yeah.
Was
Yeah, that's
was
brutal.
was accurate. So that gives you an idea, at least anecdotally, right? My family, virtually everybody was. We'll have to run through yours later as well and see what yours looks like. But
Right. I was gonna say, let's run through mine now. Thanks.
yeah, well, and there's going to be a link in the show notes, of course, and that is going to be one of our call to action is to go check because
Yeah.
it's
Oh
super
yeah.
quick and easy. You just put in your um, first name, last name, state, and year of birth. And for me, I checked because sometimes I go by my first name, sometimes I go by my middle name, and so I
Yeah.
checked both of those. And but anyway, so the next interesting point I think about this is the company that this data was came from was called National Public Data. I suspect the name will be forever infamous. And right, you gave a weird look. Why? What was that look for?
I'm like, I don't know this company from Adam. Doesn't sound
Ah,
unique.
well, right, yeah. So that's because what they are is they're a legally operating data aggregator service.
Oh geez.
So consumers, uninteresting to them, right? It's going to be big companies that want to buy our data that name is going to be known to, right?
Gotcha.
But yeah, and that's one of the most interesting details to me is that the scope of this was such that, but it was done legally. I mean, at least in terms of like it wasn't a like a hacker group or whatever, right? Like you can go to their website. They have a thing about the breach. So as far as I know, anyway, not that I'm a lawyer, but at some level, it's a legally operating company.
Oh man.
Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting that's allowed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It shouldn't be.
Yeah. Well, and that gets to one of our other questions, right? Is what group of people it appears anyway. It's not totally conclusive, but there was a researcher who did quite a bit of looking into this, and his assertion is that um, all the people that used data removal service did not have any data included in the breach. So I don't know if I know you don't use one right now. I haven't actually
No.
used one myself either, but they're becoming increasingly popular. And I just thought it was fascinating that at least okay, so they are at least following that. I mean, it's kind of sad commentary that you actually have to go and explicitly request to have all your data removed. But
Right.
at the same token, if that service exists, it's nice to know that maybe it actually has some beneficial
Value.
impact as well, right? It has some
Yeah.
value. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't decided yet if I'm going to sign up for a data removal service, but I want to mention two of them just very briefly. The first one is recommended by my favorite podcast folks that I've talked about before. I think I have anyway. And we'll include a link for that. It's called Delete Me. Don't go search it though, because their URL is either go delete me or get delete me. I can't remember. But I'll put it in the show notes. But deleteme.com is actually some other bogus company that you don't want to use. But that advertises the same service. So just make sure you click on that link if you decide you want to. It gives a 20% discount with some of that money going to those podcasts, folks, but none to us, just to be clear. Then the other one is actually the provider of the service. They're where you can go to check if your data was involved in this breach. And so they just put that up free on their website, kind of as a publicity, advertising for their own service. But this part of their service they just are offering for free. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
And they're called it's pentester.com, which is kind of a weird name for what they do, but or at least that part of what they do. But anyway, there will be a link in the show notes for that as well.
Nice. Nice. Sounds like I need to check into those.
Yeah, it's a tricky question. Something we'll probably do an episode on at some point.
Yeah.
Because this certainly makes me look, well, that seems like it has some value. I haven't done it, but then it also raises the question though, and that I want to answer, right, is okay, well, what if your data was involved in this breach?
Right.
Does signing up for a service like this even have any value still?
Right. Right. That's what I want to know.
And I think so. It depends on how much and what happens, but I mean, because it collects, of course, if your social security number is out there, then it's more or less out there, but they still have to always link all your data to you. And as you have, if you move, that's a new point of data. Uh, so the more data you have there, the less valuable, I guess maybe it would be. But anyway, it's still, I'm just not sure of the value proposition. But what I am sure about is that even though this is a bad data breach, you
Yeah.
know, our social security numbers and addresses getting compromised, that's a big deal. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean, the end of the world. All is not lost. And it doesn't mean that pursuing privacy is now pointless because these are a few of your personal data points, but every bit of your personal data has value. And
Yeah.
every every minute you're online, more of that is created. So your privacy is never going to stop being important. I mean, like your online privacy, I'm talking about specifically, obviously.
Yeah.
And especially because the most current data is always going to have the highest value. So it's never too late to start working on that. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. That makes sense.
And I think, I don't know, is there any other questions that we didn't answer, Nick, or any questions that popped up while we were talking?
Not really. You know, I'm just hoping that, yeah, I
Yeah,
know
well,
what to do.
right.
I
Okay. Well,
still,
right.
yeah,
What you should
you
do
know,
about it.
yeah, what should I do about it? If all of a sudden I find out, yeah, call to action, I'm going to be doing it,
Right.
go out, I'm going to go check.
Yeah.
But if I check and I found out it was, what should I do?
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, and so that's good. Right. Our call to action for today is right to check, and then
Right.
our next call to action, and this is something we were gonna we were talking about doing anyway, and we've talked about before, but is come back and listen next week because we're going to talk about credit freeze
Yes.
and why all the details of that, and that's really the main thing that I think. I mean, I advocated it before this happened strongly, but this
Now
just
it's going to
added,
be a must.
yeah, it just added a lot of fuel to that fire, and especially if your data was in there,
Right.
100%.
Okay.
So that's the biggest thing.
Okay.
And of
Awesome.
course,
So for our
you know,
listeners, stay tuned to next week. We're going to be going over what you can do. Okay.
yep, yeah, and the link. So just to state clearly, is we're gonna have a link in there where it'll be labeled. Click here to go check to see if your data was breached, and go check. For yourself, your spouse, kids, whatever, and that way you at least know where you stand on that front. And then
Yeah.
yeah, we'll we'll talk about credit freeze and fraud alerts both actually next week.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Okay. Any other
Hey,
closing
shout
thoughts?
out to our faithful listeners, to those that are consistently listening. Thank you. We applaud you. We appreciate you.
Yeah. And the reviews, we'd love a few more reviews on there. Had a few good reviews so far, but love some more.
Yeah. Leave us a note. Tell somebody about this episode because there's a good chance that you or somebody you know may be affected by this, it sounds like.
Yeah, this is about as widespread in the United States as I've can imagine. Honestly, really. I mean, I hope it never gets worse than this, but we'll see.
Oh, joy.
Okay, that's our super simple show today. If you're not a member of the IHP Academy already, please come join us for free. Stop searching the whole internet for answers and never knowing who to trust. Ask us instead. We made it super simple to find us, and it only takes 2 minutes to sign up. Just visit helpmegetsafe.com. Enter your name and your email. You're in. You can also find the link in our show notes. Thank you for joining us and make it a great day. Bye bye.